numbers did not accurately represent what was happening in York County waterways. The county, along with the Planning Commission Conservation District, decided to work with USGS to make an investment in real-time water quality monitoring system. And in 2020, we started collecting the real-time data. When we started the water quality monitoring program, our goal was to develop a system that gave us actual, verifiable data to inform our efforts to help reduce the levels of pollutants in York County waterways. We worked with USGS to retrofit 3 existing monitoring stations and establish 3 new monitoring stations, capturing water going into the Susquehanna River from 6 major watersheds that cover about 80% of York County. Most of the watersheds are contained within York County, but I would like to note that an additional 268 square miles of the Conewago watershed comes from Adams County that is also contributing to these numbers. Each of the 6 water quality monitoring stations that have been established in the county's waterways takes measurements at 15-minute intervals. In other words, each station collects 96 data points every day, 365 days a year. We now have 4 full years of validated data showing hourly, daily, and weekly reporting of key pollutants that measure the health of the county waterways. Capturing more data points along with more accurate data allows everyone to get a better handle on the actual stream conditions, ultimately allowing us to better manage our watersheds. Here are a few examples of what we're seeing with the 4 years of data that we've collected. In 2029, the CAST model reported that York County, In 2019, the CAST model reported that York County waterways had a current load of 957 million pounds of sediment, while York County's real-time data through USGS show a 4-year average of approximately 106 million pounds of sediment, meaning that the model data reported sediment levels over 900% greater than the actual data through the monitoring stations. The difference in nitrogen data were also significant, with computer-generated data showing nearly 12 million pounds of nitrogen in York County waterways, while the real-time data showed a 4-year average of just over 7.2 million pounds, or 60% of the levels originally assigned to York County. Phosphorus levels were also less under the water quality monitoring done by the county and USGS, with a 4-year average being around 370,000 pounds of phosphorus compared to the modeled data of 446,000 pounds, a roughly 17% difference. Another benefit of the monitoring stations, it allows us to analyze data by watershed, not just at the county level. For example, after reviewing the data, we can tell that the Fishing Creek watershed at Goldsboro contributed 32% more pounds of sediment per square mile than the other watersheds. And Muddy Creek watershed had the highest loads of nitrogen, but the lowest loads of phosphorus per square mile as compared to the other watersheds. So why is the data collection important? For understanding the timing and magnitude of the downstream transport of sediment, nitrogen, and phosphorus in our monitored watersheds, understanding long-term trends in sediments and nutrients, and for evaluating the effects of the best management practices and how effectively they reduce each of the main pollutants. The real-time water quality monitoring data can be viewed by visiting yorkcountywqm.org. This will take you to a dashboard that was developed by the USGS in collaboration with York County and allows anyone to access and easily understand the trends, but also allows more technical users the ability to take a deeper dive into the data. It's important to note that we're only halfway through this work. We are in year 5 of the 10-year program, and we are actively working on strategies to improve the water quality in York County. A few things that we hope to do with this information: get a more accurate picture of what is actually happening in our waterways, use our additional synoptic monitoring station to work up through a watershed to pinpoint the most impaired tributaries and be more strategic about our mitigation efforts, be a pilot program to show the benefits of this technology and how it can better target resources and create more beneficial projects, and work with state and federal agencies to prove how this technology can be expanded and replicated throughout the region to provide more accurate data. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Gobrick. President Shaw.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing us to be here this morning. We're very happy to be here as Farm Bureau. My name is Barron Shaw, and I am the president of the York County Farm Bureau. As a 7th-generation farmer on the same piece of property, I identify myself first as a steward of that property. I work hard to prevent erosion improve the fertility of that land, and value its biodiversity. We've been there for a long time, and I hope my family is there for a long time in the future, and I want it to be the best that it can be. No farmer wants to see the soil from the land float downstream or waste valuable money on nutrients that they apply or that are leached away before those things are used. We're highly invested in the ecology of our land, and we want to leave our farms in a better condition than when we found them. The results from York County's water monitoring initiative are good news for all York County farmers and all the residents of York County, for that matter. Given the high amount of media concern and proposed regulations in our watershed, few would have expected the results that we've seen. I hope that the environmental advocates out there and regulators see it as good news as well. These positive results cannot and should not be dismissed by those who might be disappointed to learn that farmers aren't the problem that they've been made out to be. Instead, it's a great opportunity for those who develop these complicated models to look more closely at their assumptions, their data, and the algorithms that generate these results, which perhaps should be taken with a grain of salt. We hope that they work with us to find out why we're doing so much better than expected. If there's something that we're doing well, then perhaps it can be replicated elsewhere. Whatever is found, the good news is that the stream monitors will continue to provide data in order to help validate those future improved models. And it's important that they do that because public trust is going to depend on it. Many people today have become cynical about government's role in our daily lives, but the project you've heard about here from Wade and Julie is a great example of local government doing the right thing at the right time. On behalf of York County Farm Bureau, I'd like to thank York County Commissioners for their work on this project over the last 5 years. And I'd also note that here we have an example of a federal government also stepping in and lending some credibility to what we've done with the U.S. Geological Survey. So thanks to them. I'd like to encourage you and other government leaders to learn something from York County's experience, namely that regulations and policies that have a large impact on a wide segment of the economy should only be undertaken after there's a considerable amount of evidence that the problems are real and validated, and that the solutions that are proposed are economical and effective. Thank you.
Thank you, President Shaw. Deputy Secretary Whitcomb.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you, Chairman Rowe, and others here today. And I'm just going to start off straight. We agree. We agree that the modeling tools that are being used are inaccurate. They are not a product of DEP. The Chesapeake Assessment Scenario Tool is a product of EPA Chesapeake Bay Program Office alongside 7 other jurisdictions. It's through the partnership. It's cooperative federalism. This model is developed through many iterations. Is it right? No, it's not right. But is it helpful? Is it useful? It is useful. It is helpful because when we have water quality monitoring data, it shows what is happening. It doesn't show why, doesn't show how. It also shows the history, right? It's looking back in time, as well as the real-time data that's happening today. But it doesn't exactly tell us why that's happening. We've heard earlier there's some stations that show a higher level of sediment than other stations. Why is that? What can be done? What are the investments that need to be made for conservation? So I just wanted to start off with saying we agree. Our Phase 3 Watershed Implementation Plan, which was developed in 2019 and amended in 2022, also said these same things that you already addressed. There are issues with just using the modeling tools to assess progress. That's not where we need to be. We need to be able to use other multiple lines of evidence, water quality monitoring that's happening. We need to identify where these best management practices and conservation practices are happening to then show the success. We've also invested in rapid stream delistings. across the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and we're looking at other areas across the state to do this. Looking at smaller scale watersheds or catchments where we can turn them from being impaired to being to no longer being impaired. And that leads to the community benefiting from that. We care about what's happening in Pennsylvania. I've been doing this work now for 15 years. I started with the Lancaster County Conservation District as an ag technician. I worked with farmers like the person I'm sitting next to here. We know that there's a lot of work going on the ground. And that's why we've invested in data management, in reporting. That's why we've worked with the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau. We've worked with the ag industry. We've been working with the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture and DCNR, Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission, to get all of the data to demonstrate that what we're investing in collectively matters to our communities, to our local communities. And at the end of the day, that progress will be shown in the Chesapeake Bay watershed and in the bay itself. I also want to highlight that Pennsylvania DEP has and will continue to invest in water quality monitoring. So in York County, we have a bunch of local leaders and partners here that have also invested time and money. We invest almost $5 million a year in our water quality network across the Commonwealth, as well as what's within the Chesapeake Bay or the non-tidal network. We've also known the interest here in York County. We've taken that and we've broadened our array of water quality monitoring stations and equipment so that we can have more in-stream, real-time data being shown in not only York County, but in Lancaster County and other counties that have asked for this data. It takes time. So when we talk about water quality monitoring, it's not a one-time deal. It's not a 1 year. It's not even 5 years. 10 years is considered short term, right? 10 years is kind of long for us in general, but 10 years is a short-term time frame to look at trends. Long-term is between 40 and 50 years sometimes. And so that we're able to show what the progress is happening, what is happening if it's hopefully it's not degrading, but there are so many different changes happening on the landscape. Land use changes, landowner transfers or transitions, environmental conditions changing, flooding, everything that can be imagined. And so having that real-time measured data is very important. And it helps to put the puzzle pieces together with what we're putting in the modeling tools and all of the best management practices to demonstrate why things are happening. I also just wanting to highlight here too that Pennsylvania, led by DEP, has been working with other states, right? As of today, actually right now, the entire Chesapeake Bay Program Partnership is discussing what we're going to do with the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement moving beyond 2025. What kind of metrics are we going to commit to, and why? And we have to be able to measure those. We can't just guess, and we can't rely solely on a model that we know is not accurate. The one benefit, too, I just want to share, I know everyone has feelings about modeling tools, but one of the benefits of a model is you can plant a tree today and you can get immediate credit for that tree, right, in the model. You don't see what's happening because of that tree taking so long to grow in the water quality. So that's why having both of these things together is going to be very important to determine how Pennsylvania is moving forward, not only locally in their communities, but also otherwise. And then finally, last but not least, it comes down to public trust. I heard that shared earlier, and I've heard you all say that as well. We need to be able to have trust in what we're doing and where our resources are going, right? Where the funding is going, where we're investing, and having the ability to target resources that I've heard earlier to those particular areas that are in most need is going to give us a greater benefit than trying to scattershot things and then base it on anecdotal experience. So with that, again, thank you for your interest, and I'm open and looking forward to answering any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Deputy Secretary Whitcomb. We're going to open up for member questions now. Members might ask you questions directly. They might ask questions to the panel as a whole. You're welcome to answer any question. You don't have to answer every question, but we're going to try to get to as many questions as we have in the time that we have left. Representative Joe Diorsi.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thanks again, testifiers, for your testimony. I have two questions. First, for Commissioner Wheeler. It's clear that this is a template. We want the 66 other counties in the Commonwealth to adopt this. How do we do that? Are you open to collaboration? Because the legislators here, I believe I'm speaking for all of them, would love for this to be adopted in every other county.
Yeah, we would love to share what we think is a best practice, not just in Pennsylvania, but across the nation. So we welcome any of my peers, any of Wade's peers to come and chat with us and meet with us. We were highlighted recently in the County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania newsletter, and we're also are going to be highlighted in NACO, the National Association of Counties. So we're doing our best to spread and share the word of what we're doing. And certainly we learned some things along the way, and we would not want to see others have to go through that learning process. So why not take what we've done and we've worked the kinks and bugs out of the system. So happy to share, especially with our friends right across the river who also abut to the Susquehanna River and Chesapeake Bay.
Thank you. You heard it first here, Representative Miller and Zimmerman. So Deputy Secretary Whitcomb, each of the legislators here have heard from our constituents, farmers, developers, homeowners, about interactions, in some cases overreach and hyperactivity from DEP. If there is a gap in how we're measuring environmental levels, which I believe this testimony proves, how do we know the standard being applied to applications for permits or measuring the success of a project is fair?
That's a very good question, and it's a very broad question. So I'm going to just maybe start off with saying, and I'm going to focus a little bit if you don't mind, on the agriculture sector, for example. So we know that in Pennsylvania we have agriculture regulations that require all farmers have and implement a manure management plan or nutrient management plan. Sometimes they are permitted as concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs. And actually, all of that information, their implementation of their nutrient and manure management plans, their implementation of their conservation plans or agriculture erosion sediment control plans, all of that information, if it's captured and it's reported to us, we ship it off to EPA. So we've been able to use that information to demonstrate that not only are our regulatory and compliance programs operating and functional, and we don't need to invest and create new regulations, but rather that the farmers are doing what they need to do to meet those baseline compliance measures. So we have inspection programs, and through those inspection programs for the ag sector, and I'm thinking specifically within the Chesapeake Bay watershed, we've been able to also verify the practices and the conservation practices that the farmers are doing. We're not going out looking, trying to do gotcha kind of mentality. That's not what we're after. We want people to do the right thing. And we also know that many of them are. We just have to be able to capture that and credit them. And we've been able to show that in the last 5 years, estimated nitrogen reductions coming from the agriculture sector is 5 times greater than the previous 10-year period. And that goes to the fact that not only are farmers doing what they need to do, but we're able to capture and report that information and demonstrate not only to ourselves, but also to our neighboring states that our farmers are doing what they need to do.
So might this data disparity change the way you operate?
So from a Chesapeake Bay watershed restoration perspective, we have been working very hard with EPA and with our other state partners to be able to change how we operate. that's kind of the crux of all of this, is that a lot of this comes down from some other entity, and that other entity is a cooperative partnership of 7 jurisdictions and the federal agencies. And so from a permitting standpoint, I can't speak to, some of the other permitting programs, whether it's construction stormwater, municipal stormwater, but one of the things that we are trying to do holistically across all of our permitting programs is be more efficient and to modernize and to allow people to do what they need to do, get that activity done in the most streamlined and an efficient and effective way possible.
Representative Gleim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to commend York County for all the work that you've done on this. This has been a passion of mine for 6 years, ever since I was elected. I have the stormwater management bill in the House. I also have the bill that exempts farmers from this, from the whole shebang here. And we've had hearings up at the House on the bill, which did pass out of the House, which, required multiple entities to actually test the water and redo the modeling because we know it's broken. But for some reason, we can't seem to get it through to the governor and get it signed. And as you said, the collaborative has all agreed that this is something that we need to do. And in that hearing that we had, we really did hear from all across our state that how off the modeling is. But let me just give you some information also that probably Commissioner Wheeler knows. There are over 2,500 municipalities, as you know, and out of those, 1,059 municipalities require MS4s due to the regulations, and out of those, 27 municipalities are charging a tax to their residents. And these taxes are high. It has put some of my businesses out of business because of the tax. So I went out personally in one of my municipalities and I tested the water because of the modeling I knew was wrong. And through an entity near me in Dickinson College, we were able to prove that the stream in question was not impaired, and I have all of that data. 2 years ago, I met with DEP's water section, who agreed with me. They were, all on board to help, these municipalities waive out that we prove that they were not impaired. And I have had a really big struggle in the past 2 years meeting again with them and getting them to actually do what York was able to do. When I met with my county commissioners, they said that York spent $4 million in order to implement this. So I'm just asking the commissioners, did it cost you $4 million?
So that's somewhat accurate, not entirely accurate. So at a high level, the county shouldered 70% of the cost, USGS roughly 30%, ballpark numbers. When you look at the entire 10-year period, we will have spent roughly $5.4 million, of which the county is in at 3.9 and USGS about 1.5. So that's over the 10 years. We did not shell out that kind of money up front. When we looked at when we first started this, the county was in for $1.4 million and USGS was in for $760,000. So that's not the startup cost, so to speak, to get started with this program. So overall, yes, over the 10-year period, but not for the initial startup. Okay. And we have 6 stations. I don't know how many Cumberland would need. It really depends on the size of their waterways up there. As Wade said, our monitors roughly monitor 80% of the water flow, which is pretty, significant.
Thank you for that. And Deputy Secretary, I'm under the impression that DEP utilizes EPA grant programs for stormwater management. Have you utilized any of those EPA grants for any of the municipalities to upgrade the modeling?
So we do receive a number of different EPA grants. Section 106 goes toward most of our National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES, permitting and water quality monitoring. We also receive Chesapeake Bay program grants. And we have invested funding over the years in upgrades to our the Model My Watershed system, which is a different kind of model than CAST. Again, the Chesapeake Assessment Scenario Tool is not a DEP product. We provide feedback on it, and we provide input data to it, but it is not a product that we ourselves, Pennsylvania, would be able to invest our own dollars in upgrading, right? But we do have other systems. We invest, like I said, in water quality monitoring, as well as our dashboards for public use and to share with our local organizations, conservation districts. And we also use our own state funds to support watershed specialists at the conservation district. So those watershed specialists also go out and do water quality monitoring and sampling and outreach and education. So we have a wide array of funding sources, and we do invest them in the water quality monitoring, as well as the support that's needed and the labor that's needed to do that. And we've worked collaboratively with the Susquehanna River Basin Commission and with USGS, and we've actually have had and continue to have contracts with SRBC to help with the water quality monitoring within the Susquehanna River Basin.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question, Mr. Chairman. Even though you are explaining that you don't actually own the system itself, the mapping and things like that, who has the authority to update it?
So this is an interesting, conversation, because we all have the authority to update it. The Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, Washington, D.C., and New York all participate. We all provide feedback and updates and reviews to the Chesapeake Assessment Scenario Tool. At the end of the day, what gets approved or what gets authorized for use, we have one vote out of 9. And we have been pushing really hard over the last several years to say this is not right. This is not accurate. Our Phase 3 WIP, apparently, according to some, fell short. But to us, it did not, because we know that there are projects out there, there are BMPs out there that have been implemented and require continuous verification, continuous reinspection, and that those are the rules. Those are the rules that are set by the Chesapeake Bay Partnership. So we have to answer not only to ourselves and to you, but we have to answer to others across the partnership too. So every 2 years, the model is updated, it's reviewed, we provide feedback, we provide comment, we try to kick the tires and identify what's wrong, what's right, and we've invested a lot of staff resources in trying to make it as good as it can be, knowing that it's still not quite there. It's not going to be perfect.
Thank you.
Representative Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not a big fan of DEP, as I told you beforehand, but I want to start with a compliment for you, Jill, because there's a number of ways you could have found to not be here, and unfortunately that happens more than we like. So none of this is directed at you personally. I'm gonna make a couple very quick comments, and then I have a question for 2 or 3 of you. So I sort of tried to come up with something kind of cute here: consequence, community, common sense. These policies and overreach, and I'm going to drift into permitting for a minute, they have real consequence. So when I was first running for office, even before Commissioner Wheeler was in her role, this was about 8 years ago. Mr. Shaw will remember this. We were on the verge of implementing a rain tax here in York County, and not only an unnecessary tax, and we felt unfair tax. It had real consequence, this data. There were a number of very contentious meetings within our community. It had a real impact. I remember being at a I don't know if you were there, Barron, that night or not, but down in Winterstown, for example, a couple hundred people out here, representatives from the county, a lot of hostility, and some of that goes with the territory, but it was all based on false assumption. This stuff has consequence. Our state is getting older, smaller, and poorer by the day. We just had a good internal meeting up at DEP, and I shared that. I'll be briefer here. But DEP, along with PennDOT and some of our antiquated tax policy, but regulatory more than anything, and DEP at the top of the list, is killing our businesses. People don't have time for 1 year, 2 year turnarounds on permits. When they can go to Virginia. We can't even, we can't begin to compete with Ohio. We can't even compete with Maryland in many cases. It chases our businesses away, which takes our working adults away, which takes their children away. Our only demographic that's growing in this state is the over 80 demographic. I love seniors, but you can't run a state with retirees. These things have real consequence when we're not competitive. It's not just a pro-business statement. It affects our community, and we need to bring some common sense to bear here. My last example is one of the most prominent farmers in my district, a man held in extremely high regard, has been messing around with DEP for 3 years now because he had a supposed wetland, a third of an acre in his backyard that didn't stay wet. It did nothing but serve as a breeding ground for mosquitoes, planted pristine grass. He did not blacktop it. He didn't dump motor oil. He planted grass in his yard. He's now $100,000 or more into engineering and legal fees. DEP wants to take 2.5 acres of land from him, flood it unnecessarily in a punitive nature, providing no environmental benefit. You have a lot of power. Most people don't have the financial means or the wherewithal to challenge this in court. There's another couple 100,000. So these things have real consequence to our community. And it's critically important that DEP shows some restraint in exercising their power. We show some common sense and have you guys start focusing on things that are really important, like train wrecks out in western PA with big chemical spills and the issues in the southeast with drinking water. Not messing around with a guy planting a third of an acre of grass in his backyard. There needs to be a reprioritization. So to get to in that vein and to get to my questions, Commissioner Wheeler, and I'll come back, Jill, in just a second. Commissioner Wheeler, could you just talk about what you've done and what we could do further to have the counties take on a little bit more of the role that DEP is providing so they could focus on what in my mind would be bigger and better endeavors?
While we were working on the water quality initiative, one of the things I heard, in particular when I was out campaigning, was the time it takes to get permits through. And so I do want to give DEP some credit. The Conservation District, which I'm a board member of, we went to them because we wanted to be able to turn around post-construction stormwater management permits faster for our residents. And so we've been doing this now for 3 years. So I'm glad the state decided to implement a streamlined process, but we've been doing it for 3 years here in York County. And it was an effort to work with our developers who are driving economic growth in our community to advance the projects that they're doing. I've often said that we need to preserve and conserve conserve land, but we also need to develop land. Both of those things need to exist in communities to drive economic growth. And so we need to ensure that while we're doing those things, we are also being good stewards of the land. So we've had that process in place now for a little over 3 years, and we would encourage DEP to let the conservation districts have a little more authority in being able to approve permits, because once they go up into the state, there's so much bureaucracy and red tape that happens up there. I mean, I talk to developers all the time, and they're waiting 2, 3, 5 years to get their permits through, and by then their opportunity for economic growth may have gone and went to another, not just another county, but another state. So I would concur and support counties to have more authority than we do now in getting permits through the process.
Thank you. Yeah, to that point, John Kinsley, God rest his soul, who we tragically lost a couple years ago, I guess now almost, he had told me a number of years ago, you know, that a permit that takes 3-4 months in Virginia would take 1.5 years, 2 years here in Pennsylvania. And people just, businesses, I consulted with the biggest and best companies in the world, and they don't have that kind of time. They have other options. Jill, before we get to you, Barron, could you talk very quickly, please, about what maybe if you had 1 or 2 things that DEP could do better from a farmer's perspective to maybe just you know, continue to build respect in the community and maybe a little more, I don't know, in my mind, common sense here and there. There are 1 or 2 things you just want to comment on.
Well, the issue that you brought up, you know, of a nearby neighbor who's had problems with, you know, we'll call it lack of restraint on the part of the DEP, that's the kind of thing that scares farmers, because they talk to each other about that kind of thing. And the last thing that we need is to worry about the fact that, you know, our plow ran outside of where it normally runs. And just to give you an idea of the amount of red tape that we have to worry about, it's not just DEP, right? It's a lot of other organizations that have their fingers into our business and are expecting us to do things. So it's, you know, the pesticide regulations. We have to have certifications, safety inspections. We have to keep all of the records for that. Labor, obviously, we have to do all of that, and so we have a labor department that's deeply invested and comes around and looks at things. Things you wouldn't even expect, like good agricultural practices. Well, what's a good agricultural practice? Well, it's the companies that buy produce coming together and having plausible deniability, meaning that they're regulating us looking for problems. So the problems that they look for are things that might impact the safety. It's where the Food Safety Modernization Act kind of started. So it's got all of these rules. There's one rule, for instance, called the bunny rule. That's what I call it, right? It's what are you documenting every time that wildlife has some kind of a chance to impact your crop? So technically, if I see a bunny out in my strawberry field, I'm supposed to write it down. It's all of these things, and I was not a farmer all my life. I mean, I spent 20 years working for big companies doing other stuff. And when I came back, I was told by many people that they were tired of being in the business because of the extreme amount of regulation from all the different parts of the government, and it's just becoming unbearable for that next generation. So DEP is just, you know, one part of that, and so I apologize if I went off there for stuff that's not outside of DEP, but you know, that's the regime and that's the realm that we live in today as farmers. Nutrient management plans to in Maryland. We're told exactly how much of each kind of product we can put on the ground based on the tests that we have to do every 2 years and turn into the state. Now that's there, not here, but that's the kind of world that we farmers live in, and it's tough.
So for the sake of time, Jill, do you guys just generally, do you look at being able to delegate things to the county? For example, PennDOT projects are held up waiting on DEP. You know, I've talked to them. They feel there's lots of things they could do internally. I mean, you have some really important things out there that need to be done. Does the department look at ways to kind of streamline and delegate and reprioritize, if that makes sense?
Yes. So I appreciate the question about delegation to conservation districts. We do delegate a lot of our work. So as Commissioner Wheeler had noted, all of our conservation districts are delegated the construction stormwater permitting and compliance at different levels. Most of them conduct the permit review, the E&S plan review, and conduct all the compliance inspections related to that. We do have, I think, almost 8, 9, or 10, give or take, conservation districts that are also delegated the post-construction stormwater management, like York County is. It's a choice, right? So not only are we asking the conservation districts to accept delegation or delegated authority for these types of things. Chapter 105, Water Obstructions and Encroachments Program. About half of the conservation districts have accepted delegation on that because there is no funding available to provide to them. So it's basically they're doing it on their own volition. They're doing it for the community value, but they don't receive any funding from the state because we don't have any funding to provide to them. The nutrient management program and the manure management program, the Chesapeake Bay technician programs, all of those are delegated or grants that are provided to conservation districts. And one final thing, we do have the Conservation District Fund Allocation Program, which is a line item in DEP's general fund as well as in Department of Ag. And that fund allocation program does go to provide funding to conservation districts to implement the construction stormwater permitting program, as well as additional funding to support other staff, administrative, management staff. So we are always looking for opportunities to delegate these programs to the conservation districts. It is always their choice, their board of directors, and to accept the delegation or to accept the program. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I'm just end and say, again, nothing personal. The department has a really bad reputation in the business community and the farming community. That should not, it's easy to be flippant and dismiss that. I think we need to have a lot bigger focus on common sense and competitiveness with our surrounding states, because we're not going to have young people here to take care of our aging population. The consequences are tremendous. So the competitiveness needs to be a much higher consideration in some of getting some of these projects approved and turned around, because our reputation is bad as a state within the business community as well. So thank you.
Representative Pugh.
Thank you, and this is quite a subject for me, so please bear with me. I do have a couple of questions, and I really want to commend York County and all the work that you have done testing the waters and getting that done. Also let everybody know up here, my colleagues, I am one of the 27 counties that are charging a rain tax to our residents inside of our county. It is overbearing, it is difficult, and it is costly to our businesses and on the backs of our residents. So I think it's unfair when it comes right down to it. And I was also very, very surprised since taking this position to find out that the state of Pennsylvania does not pay into the projects. Example, the building that we work in does not participate in this process, nor do they pay into the repairs to have things done. I have letters from state agencies throughout my district, which is a taxable rain tax, stating that this is a tax and that they are not responsible for paying a tax. They are exempt. Well, what about our churches? Well, what about our nonprofits? They're also tax exempt. Why are they still paying into it? So it's not a gotcha moment, it's a frustrating moment, and it's been going on for several years. And I think we need to figure that out, because I think the state of Pennsylvania has more roads and more impervious ground than many municipalities and counties across the state. I also have and I'm curious why we don't do more of this. Pennsylvania is home to mining, right? That's what we were known for, coal mining. It's energy. That's what we did. And I'm wondering why we don't take the monies that are in the line item of the budget for these MS4 and NPDES projects and put them more into reclaiming the land and the mines and the columns that are left, which are putting rust and putting pollutants into our water, our air, and the dust instead of coming down on our farmers and on our residents. I think if we really want to clean the water, we really need to get into focusing on what is actually creating the biggest pollutant of it. If it rains in our area, we actually have rust coming up through the grates inside of my communities. When I asked the folks in our communities, where does that water go? It's going into the Chesapeake because it's part of the stormwater. So why aren't we cleaning this and giving it back to the communities in the form of parks, in the form of public spaces, and actually making a real difference instead of coming down, like I said, on the farmers and the residents? So I'm just wondering if you could tell me why we haven't focused more on that. Because I do have a stream, the Toby Creek stream, that collapsed. I'm sure you know. DEP was involved, and we have hundreds of thousands of tons of rock and concrete trying to block a hole. Because when that collapsed, it was undermining a business and bringing the mine residue up into my streets, into the rest of the district.
I'm presuming you're directing these questions to me?
Well, yeah, for this one.
Well,
yeah.
I appreciate it, and so I want to just maybe direct your attention, just for a moment. I put these on your places. Actually, one of your staff actually helped me with this. This is basically an overarching what we do in the water programs, and I think sometimes there's everything either goes into the air or goes in the water, right? Those are the two things that at the end of the day, all of the things that we do on the landscape impact either air or water. When you're talking about abandoned mine lands and mine land restoration and AMD, acid mine drainage treatments, we have been investing in those projects, not only in the water program through the EPA Section 319 or non-point source management grants that we provide to county conservation districts and other nonprofit organizations for anything water related, but also the Bureau of Abandoned Mine Reclamation, or BAMR, is outside of the water program, but we work with them very closely. They're the ones that have a lot of federal and state monies that go toward abandoned mine reclamation and acid mine drainage. I can tell you that especially in areas like Clearfield County, which I think is the top county for abandoned mine lands in the entire state of the Commonwealth, that they have been working very diligently on that. And I can tell you also that we at Pennsylvania DEP have been working very hard to get credit toward those types of projects in the model that we were talking about. They don't count. They don't count. And it's unfortunate because they should, because we're turning a dead stream into a living stream. They have, biological and chemical and physical attributes that now they're able to be, utilized. It's drinking water too. A lot of our drinking water, public water sources are surface waters. So it all very much interconnects, and we are investing in those projects as well. We'd really like to invest in more.
Okay. And so I'm assuming it's EPA that says it doesn't qualify?
Yes.
Okay. So let me ask you this question. I'm working with counterparts on the federal side to get rid of this federal mandate, this executive order that was put into place by the federal government, and they're making some traction on that. What happens in the state of Pennsylvania if the federal government says, we're done?
We lose about half of our funding to go toward projects. That's that.
Why do we still have to do the projects?
Because of our own local communities. It's important to us from a local water quality standpoint, right? So I think if I'm hearing you right, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if you're talking about the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, or MS4 permitting program, that is an EPA program that we are delegated. We were just talking about delegating contracts. We're delegated from EPA to implement those programs. But at the end of the day, What we do locally is the focus is on local restoration and on community restoration.
Right, so if what they're calling the unfunded mandate were to be stricken, DEP in the state of Pennsylvania, you're telling me, plans to continue with it? And these mandates and the fees and the projects?
So the MS4 program itself, if it goes away from a federal standpoint, we would no longer have a federal program to administer. However, there's Act 167, which is the Stormwater Management Act. So there are still state-level stormwater management requirements based upon, the laws and regulations promulgated at the state level as well.
Okay, so some of it does come down to the laws. So I truly appreciate this. One other concern that I have that I've met with conservation districts and the different authorities inside of my district is why, if the conservation district does a project with somebody else, that authority doesn't automatically get credit for that project. That do they have to do separate projects and get paid for? Say the conservation district does a project, but the authority within that district in which they did the project, why isn't the credit utilized? A footprint is only so big. There's only so many projects you can do. So to me, like dual enrollment on a college, there should be dual credits for these agencies.
So I'm going to repeat back to you what I think I heard, because I don't want to answer your question in the wrong way. So projects that the conservation districts work on, if it's on a farm, for example, and it's outside of the MS4 community, it can be within a mile, and then that MS4.
This would be, just so we get the right answer, this is within the community.
Right. So, it depends on the. So there are ways in which an MS4 could receive credit for conservation practices being implemented on farms within their urbanized area. This has been basically a negotiation with EPA on what we can account for toward crediting that municipality and what we can't. So there are some flexibilities built in. It's likely not as flexible as everyone wants it to be, but there are opportunities there. And we do have a frequently asked question document that helps municipalities understand, where they won't be able to make those, to get credit, for example, for that. If they're doing a stream restoration project within that municipality, then certainly. But sometimes we get a little bit like the ag-related projects are not necessarily perhaps maybe dealing with the impairment caused by the impervious surfaces coming from that municipality. So that's why we tried to expand that flexibility as much as possible.
Okay, I appreciate it. It does sound like I have some work that I have to do. So just know, and I appreciate it, that I plan on doing that, because I don't think it's fair that everybody's not participating in this project, and in my area, only the businesses, the farmers, and the residents are paying for it. Thank you.
Representative Fink.
Good morning. I just want to give kudos out to York County for leading the way. I'm not only in our water quality, but it seems like every topic that we discuss in Harrisburg, York County does a bang-up job. Proud to be a York Countyan. Deputy Secretary Whitcomb, so you said in your testimony that the policies that DEP implements is telling you what is happening, but why it's happening isn't part of that. But actually, that's not really true. If your numbers of what you're telling us is happening is over 900% inaccurate, what trust do the other counties have that their numbers are correct?
So we've spent, and we continue, we have a group of folks at DEP that work very closely with the county's within the Chesapeake Bay watershed and answer all of the questions that we've been doing a lot of research and helping them understand what the model is, where it's not necessarily right, but where it's useful, where it's not useful. And the thing that I will say is that we were just talking about mandates. In order for us to be able to demonstrate progress to EPA, and EPA evaluates progress every year for all of the jurisdictions, they use the model to determine that. And so the way in which we provided the snapshots, as was noted earlier, we provided snapshots. What's your modeled nitrogen phosphorus sediment loads? That's your starting point. Based upon what folks at EPA, and it's not only EPA, it's other organizations, it's environmental organizations, it's other states, it's other entities, it's farmers, it's fishermen, it's everybody, that it's mutual accountability. How do we hold ourselves accountable? And that's the only way that has been determined to date on how we're all being held accountable is based on what the model says. So that's why what York's doing is incredibly important, because we can hold York County up and say, they're doing this. We need to incorporate water quality monitoring data in the assessment of our progress. We have to, because you're absolutely right. That's where public trust and public respect come in. And so we've been working together. We've been transparent in what we know, what we don't know. And we're learning a lot more, and we're gleaning a lot more information, and we're using that data to support our stance, our collective stance. York County, Lancaster County, every county that we've been working with, our message is the same. We need to be able to be measured by more than just what the model is telling us.
So we're using the data that we're collecting, but the data is wrong. Do we have other counties that are questioning, like York County has?
Absolutely.
What are they doing about it?
They're doing something very similar, but the issue is that it takes a lot of funding resources, as was noted earlier. Almost $5 million over the course of 10 years coming from York County. We've been investing in $5 million a year across the entire state in our water quality monitoring network. That funding comes from our Clean Water Fund, the Environmental Stewardship Fund. It's resource intensive. There's 85,500 stream miles in Pennsylvania. We can't have these systems in every single stream mile. So we have to be able to bring together these pieces and have them inform each other. And not just, again, we're not solely relying on the model. And that's what we've been trying to project and identify with our partners across the entire Bay program.
One more question, Mr. Chairman. So I'm hearing a lot, your EPA says we have to do this, or EPA says we can't do this. So York County went out on its own and did what they know is right, and it cost them a little bit of money. What is the DEP doing that might be frowned upon from the EPA, but you know what is good and needs to be done? What changes have you made since knowing the way that you're doing things is giving you inaccurate data?
So that's a nice lead-in to the other document that is put on your desk. So Pennsylvania DEP has worked very hard to change the message from being Bay-centric, model-centric, to being what is happening today? What is happening in our communities? What are the benefits that are happening? That shift in focus is really important to us. And from an accountability standpoint, just know that DEP Pennsylvania is the accountable one to the total maximum daily load planning target. The counties were asked to implement projects toward a planning goal. So their participation in this is voluntary. We are not mandating that they do anything. We are asking them because we know we're not going to be the ones to do it without their assistance, right? All the work happens locally, period, end of story. And so there's been a lot of different things that we've been pushing for, and we've actually been able to get other states to hear us. Other states are implementing new laws, new programs. One is the Maryland Whole Watershed Act. That was predicated on policies in our rapid stream delisting program here in Pennsylvania. It's all very much how we're pushing this forward. And again, like I said today, people are discussing what are the commitments that we're going to be making moving forward. And we've been very staunchly opposed to tying ourselves down to achieving something that will only be measured by a model.
All right, we have two members with questions left in about 15 minutes, so we're going to keep them short and sweet. Representative Miller.
Thank you all for being here today. Mr. Gobrecht, the practical question, the implementation of the water monitoring and all that went into this, is it overwhelming? Is it difficult? Is it relatively straightforward for exporting this to another county?
I'll say when we started, USGS played a big role. That's why we coordinated with USGS. They did the calibrations, they did the setup, they still do the maintenance. I think they have that process figured out. So I think it's something that could fairly easily be replicated to other counties, to other locations throughout the state. USGS routinely goes out, calibrates to make sure those monitoring systems are reading accurate. So we have 10 years of a contract with USGS to keep that maintenance plan up. So the process is in place. With their assistance, it could be fairly replicated throughout the region.
Okay. I have a question now about cost. So we've heard it's about $5-point-something million over 10 years. So my question is currently, just trying to understand the concept of cost. So you have the current regulations that farmers, businesses, et cetera, have to comply with. So current regulations and the cost of businesses. This costs about $5 million over 10 years. What would the cost be if the regulations changed to the business community? In other words, right now, here are the regulations and here are the costs that counties and farmers have to pay. If the regulations change, do you believe there'd be a commensurate lowering of costs to businesses, farming, counties, et cetera?
I mean,
and an estimate to that, if you can venture a guess.
That's a great question. I think we'd want to go collect some data. But as far as the cost for the water quality monitoring station, they're a fixed cost, right? And for us, it will equate to $5.4 million over 10 years, right? We have 6 monitors. So it really depends on each county and how many monitors they're going to put in and how much of the water flow they want to measure. Anecdotally, based on data that I see at the Conservation District, the fees associated with permitting, fees associated with complaints that are filed that go up to DEP. So I would speculate that we would see an increase in revenue and economic growth in our community if we are able to take down some of those barriers. But I would want to go back and do some homework and get you some numbers.
So theoretically, because of the current regulations are saying that you're much worse than you really are.
Right.
So if the regulations show the reality, then theoretically you'd have a lowering of costs for compliance, et cetera.
Sure. I would say, though, because I'm a data-driven person, that we would still want to continue to monitor and collect the data.
Certainly.
Because the one thing that we have now is the data. And as Wade said, we have multiple watersheds in our community. So if there is an area that does have higher nitrogen, then we can go target that area and look at Are there farmlands contiguous to that? Is there industrial site, right? What is causing that? So we would still want to collect the data so that we can continue to be good stewards of the land, and the only way we can do this is if we have the data to take action on. I would also add that one of the things that you might want to look at, and again, it's all relative depending on the size of the county and the number of farmlands, but when I look at last year alone, our conservation district processed over 360 permit applications and 819 site visits. That's a lot of work by people right on the ground, again, going out and working with our farmers and our developers to ensure that we've got those plans in place. So you might want to take a look at how does that compare to other counties. If you're not out making assessments, collecting the data, I don't know how you can figure out whether you're doing a good job or not.
Okay, thank you. And one more, Mr. Chairman, please, very quickly. Ms. Whitcomb, thank you for your testimony. So you said that you agree with the York and their method and the results. The question I have is just trying to understand, you mentioned about the Chesapeake Bay Partnership. You have 7 jurisdictions, this overwhelming group. Here's my question. Who is the boss? And who makes the final decision?
So I'd really love to be the boss, but I'm not. So this is, again, the Chesapeake Bay Program Partnership is founded upon cooperative federalism. So cooperative federalism basically is that the states work together with the federal government. At the end of the day, we have consensus-based decision-making. So we all have to agree. For some of the things, they're more voluntary. The Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement is a voluntary agreement that the governors and the federal government sign on to. The agreement itself is voluntary. The Chesapeake Bay Total Maximum Daily Load is not voluntary. It is a regulatory piece of the overall puzzle. That regulatory piece is administered, overseen by EPA. So when you ask who's the boss, for the Bay TMDL, EPA is the boss, but we answer to all of our surrounding states and the non-governmental organizations, the advisory committees. There's 4 advisory committees. One is a new advisory committee. It's the Ag Advisory Committee. We finally got an Ag Advisory Committee to advise the Bay program. And Local Government Advisory Committee, Science and Technical Advisory Committee, and the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. So this is a very large organization comprised of many hundreds of people, many agencies from top down. So I just wanted to kind of address that there are 2 pieces to all of this, that the agreement itself is voluntary, but the TMDL is not. And the TMDL lasts forever.
Okay, so for time, so in other words, there's nothing stopping DEP from adopting the York model and mandating it across Pennsylvania to be used, and then regulations to flow from that.
So again, water quality monitoring has been a voluntary effort because of the costs associated. So we, that's a very interesting observation that honestly I haven't thought about before, but something that, if we could maybe discuss at a later time, if I'd really appreciate and be interested in hearing your thoughts and your perspective on that.
Very good, thank you.
Representative Zimmerman.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks for everyone for your testimony. One thing I'll just comment on to start with is that I think we have some really, really good conservation districts in many counties throughout Pennsylvania. I think they should do most of the farm permitting, a lot less by DEP, a lot less even by townships. And I think we'd make a lot of progress just having them much more directly involved. So here's my one of the 2 questions. The question is that for many years, it was all about water quality that we had to meet, that, you know, we had to meet whether you're building something or whatever that might be. In more recent times, though, it's moving more towards volume from coming out of DEP. Now, so what's happened then is that means the goalpost has been moved. And the one thing that farmers and business owners need more than anything else is certainty. And so now we have even less certainty. And the question is the whole piece of volume of water that's now being emphasized, is that part of the modeling or not? Is it still all based on quality?
So again, I think you're describing the recent draft municipal separate storm sewer system permit, where we shifted away from nitrogen phosphorus sediment to volume management objective. And there was a very large stakeholder group comprised of municipalities, non-governmental organizations, and agency folks that discussed the development of this draft permit. So when you deal with volume, you're dealing with water quality, right? So when you're managing volume, you're managing the nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment. The end result here, or the idea behind shifting to volume management, is because of flooding, and because people are losing property. There's been loss of life due to flooding events. And so how do we deal with flooding through, and part of it is through stormwater management. So that's kind of the impetus or the rationale. I understand what you're saying about, you know, this perception of moving the goalposts. We still will provide credit toward the projects that have already been implemented in the, you know, this current iteration of the permit. But that's one of the main reasons why we moved to volume management, is because of stormwater management.
So is the volume piece in the modeling itself, or that's not been updated?
So volume does have something to do with the nutrients and the sediment loading, because when we have a giant flush of water coming down the river or the streams, right, you're going to get a greater flush of those pollutants, right? So volume is not necessarily a particular input separate from the overall, you know, monitoring data. And I do want to just highlight too, is that monitoring data is incorporated into the model, just not all of it. So, and it's not updated as frequently as the model is.
Okay, and that's really what needs to happen. So I know we're crushed on a time crunch here, but just, so the way I understand is that EPA on a federal level sets these thresholds for everything that all of us get involved in. And then every state needs to meet those thresholds. But every state is allowed to be more restrictive in certain areas, not less. And the one area that Pennsylvania has been more restrictive than many of our surrounding states even is this whole idea of an NPDES permit, where some states, it's if you disturb 5 acres or more, it pushes you into the NPDES permit. Pennsylvania is 1 acre or more. That pushes every farm project, every farm building into an NPDES permit. A lot of our businesses, and the hard reality is that it's costing business and farmers in Pennsylvania billions of dollars a year that other states are not paying. And in my conversation with some folks in EPA, that they said what's happening in Pennsylvania is Pennsylvania is actually more restrictive in almost everything compared to other states that are more restrictive in things that are more specific to their state, that's more impactful to their own state. So I get the Chesapeake Bay has value, and we need to be more restrictive for some reasons there, but to be more restrictive in everything raises a lot of questions.
Can I maybe respond to the one comment that you made? So every state has to, for construction stormwater, the threshold is 1 acre for NPDES permitting. What we're doing in Pennsylvania, which is different than the other states, is that we require post-construction stormwater management at that 1 acre threshold, whereas other ones require it at 5 acres. So some of that has to do with historic case law, anti-degradation policies, and those types of things. But we are actively now developing BMP suites, or basically a list of BMPs to make it simpler. We also have a general permit that is specific to, it's PAG01. That general permit is supposed to be simpler for those 1 acre earth disturbance type projects. We'd like to see those permits being used more, that permit coverage being used more. So, you know, glad to talk to you about that as well, and how we get the word out and how we make things simpler for folks to be able to get the things that they need to do done. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got one very brief question myself, and then I'm going to turn it over to Representative Diorsi. Looking at what we're here for today, talking about, you know, if York hadn't stepped up to the plate, what kind of a situation they would be in, working off of the model data. I know we're in a different DEP district, but up in my district, we're dealing with a now 3+ year permitting issue for a drain pipe, a very small drain pipe. And when we convened a meeting with the landowner, Army Corps of Engineers, congressman staff, senatorial staff, DEP staff, when we sat down, I had asked, well, we're talking about replacing existing infrastructure, not new infrastructure, so isn't there a much more expedited permitting process than this multi-year thing that we've done? And they said, well, yes, there is, but we're already doing this other thing now. So the fact that we are talking about multiple people spending multiple years doing something that even the DEP team in my district admitted they didn't need to do, internally, who's kind of that watchdog that says, hey guys, like, we understand you could do it this way, but it would be easier, cheaper, and more expeditious for all parties involved, on your staff, on landowners, on taxpayers, on legislative folks trying to advocate. Who's that watchdog that holds DEP accountable to say, hey, let's try to do it the easier way instead of the harder way?
So I would say that that is incumbent upon all of us at the agency to look for a solution that works for everyone and that also doesn't have negative impacts. One thing, too, that I would note is a lot of times staff might be communicating with the consultants. And I'm not saying that that happened in your case, but so ensuring that there is direct communication and open lines and transparent communication between the applicant or the landowner and the department early on in the process, before they even think about applying, laying the groundwork for that so that it does make it a simpler, more expedited, streamlined process is really important. We don't have a requirement for pre-application meetings. But it is something that we've been strongly encouraging folks to do. I know sometimes it's scary to pick up the phone and call DEP, but that's going to be in the best interest of that landowner, that permit applicant, to pick up the phone and say, I'd like to schedule a meeting and talk through what I need to do. What are my end goals and how do I get there? So that we don't end up with getting papers in, looking at it, not really having any context about the construction time frame, et cetera. That's what we're trying to encourage people to do. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. You guys have been fantastic. I know we've had some hard questions today. I appreciate all of your willingness to be here. Nobody had to be here, so thank you for taking the time. Representative Diorsi, some quick closing remarks. Thanks,
Mr. Chairman. And I wanted to ask one follow-up question. Perhaps you could keep it to 30 seconds or so. President, Commissioner, the new proposals for MS4 permit regs, how would that affect York County and other counties?
Sure. The concern that York County has, along with many other counties, is, as Representative Zimmerman said, the goalpost is shifting. So now we have a way to actually measure the pounds of nutrients, but now we're being asked to measure the volume. And the concern that we have in York is that we have yet to be able to see the scientific connection between measuring water quality through volume management plans versus real-time water quality data. So we would like to see what the connection is, because right now we don't know what that is. So we want to measure what we have been measuring, what we know is factual, pounds of nutrients, pounds of sediment.
Thank you. And in wrapping up, I just want to reiterate, there's 2 bills from this panel that would address challenges that we've discussed today. Number 1, Rep. Zimmerman, who did mention it, aligning NPDES permit thresholds with the federal standards, 1 acre to 5 acre. And then I have a bill in the House that would exempt single-family residential homes from needing an NPDES permit. I think those are sensible bills, and we hope they're considered in the House. And I just want to thank the testifiers again for your time, for your expertise. I'd like to thank the legislators for an engaged conversation, John Wright Restaurant for hosting, and all of the guests for joining us.
Thank you, Representative DeOrsi. I think it's encouraging to see that when local governments are empowered to lead, you guys are the boots on the ground, innovation truly does follow. And when we measure what's actually happening, not necessarily just relying on models, we see much better outcomes for farmers, for families, for businesses, and for the environment itself. You guys in York County, you saw a gap in the data. You partnered with USGS. You built a real-time monitoring system, and that has delivered accurate and accountable and transparent data. I'm hopeful that the data systems and models that the state relies on that are outdated, too often wrong, somewhat disconnected from the local community as you guys are, I hope we can take note of that. Because if we're serious about protecting water quality, I'm hoping to see that DEP will start modernizing its tools, embracing these partnerships that we're seeing on the state and local level, and replicating them across the Commonwealth. I want to make a quick plug before we close today. On October 28th, we are going to be holding the first multi-state policy hearing in Harrisburg. We're going to be inviting legislators from New Jersey, Maryland, and Virginia who are going to be joining us to talk about the all-important issue of energy reliability, affordability, and sustainability. Thank you all very much for your time. Thank you to the testifiers. Thank you to the members. Thank you to our hosts. And thank you to our guests for attending. This hearing is adjourned.